Hello, my name is Brian Joseph Lee. I am the Director of Public Forum, and welcome back to Creative Activism, a day of art, ideas, and action. The urgency for a new world has sounded the call, and we are all needed to build the future we're waiting for. For our next session, Wide Awake, Art and the Future of Social Justice, we are thrilled to welcome Four Freedoms, an artist collective that is building a political movement based in creativity, protest, and direct action. Here to speak about their vision for 2020 and beyond are artists, creatives, activists, and organizers Niama Sandy, Anya Ayoung Chee, Helina Metaferia, and Kaneza Schaal, with Executive Director for Four Freedoms, Claudia Peña.
Hello, welcome to this panel that I'm so excited to be a part of. I'm always excited to talk about art and its role in promoting justice. And we're really excited to be here and thankful to the Public Forum and the team at the Public Theater for putting together and hosting Creative Activism. This is Wide Awake's Art and the Future of Justice. And soon I will be joined by the panelists of this panel who are brilliant creatives, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Before we get into that, I just wanted to share a little bit about sort of the history of the Wide Awakes and what we're doing at Four Freedoms as we are part of the broader movement of the Wide Awakes. The Wide Awakes in terms of history, I think it's important to know just a little bit about it. In the 1860s, around that time, there was a band of abolitionists, people who were against the institution of slavery. And it was made up mostly of working class folks, mostly white men, but also there were Black people who were wide awakes, and also there were women who were wide awakes. So part of their values also included suffrage and the right for folks to vote. But they focused mostly on abolition. And in order to push those views forward, they organized. They organized marches, they had processions, they wore capes, they carried torches. They marched in the thousands, in the tens of thousands in New York and other states. And they were pushing in order to elect Abraham Lincoln, who himself was not an abolitionist, though he's often given that credit. But they pushed him in order to make those decisions after being elected. And they're part of the reason why slavery was abolished at that time. The Wide Awakes of that time were revolutionary. They had all these radical ideas that were really inspiring. If you want to go into the archives, there's so many articles in the New York Times and such that talk about the impact that they had on the wider electorate and the wider population. This year, in 2020, there's been a reawakening of the Wide Awakes of sorts. And what makes it most exciting from my personal perspective is that it's an open source social movement. There are Wide Awakes in lots of different states, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in California, in Louisiana, in Florida, in Michigan, in Illinois, in DC, in Puerto Rico. There's also talk of Wide Awakes chapters starting in other places and connections being made, including in Cuba, in Tokyo, Japan, in Berlin, Germany. We have one partner or one collaborator in critical resistance that is attempting to start a chapter of the Wide Awakes inside of a correction facility. The Wide Awakes belongs to everybody. It belongs to nobody, and it belongs to everybody at the same time. And that's why I say the exciting part to me is how open source it is, that people can come in and bring whatever it is that they have, whatever they got, whatever you're carrying with you, bring it to the movement and just add to the voice, to the cacophony of voices that are raising the volume on the level so high so that as we move into the elections of November and beyond, of course, that this movement that is full of radical listening, radical acceptance, and love. One of the concepts that people talk about is love over rules. There's a bunch of different values that are coming out of this that people are really excited about and inspired by, and hopefully will continue to move lots of issues regarding justice forward. Most importantly, right now, it's engagement in the elections in whatever way that means for folks. I want to quickly walk you through this infinite playbook, which is the Four Freedoms iteration of what it means to play right now. And this is just one perspective, one view of the wide awakes. And people are welcome to participate in the ways that we are offering. You're also super welcome to create your own form of playing and your own participation in this movement. So, next slide. This is just a bit about Four Freedoms in our organization. It's artist-led. One of our main core missions is to inspire and model civic joy, civic participation, discourse, debate, conversation, anything that is going to make people more interested in participating in the ways that policies, ideas, solutions are created, contemplated, and manifested around them. Next slide. So we've been talking about play because we believe that in order to move things forwards and in order to progress society, people need to be involved. And when you're involved and you participate, it's really easy to think about it as play. Next slide. Here are some of the rules that we offer in order to be able to participate in this game. Carry your own trash is one of my favorites because it speaks to the idea that we all have stuff that we're bringing in from our lived experiences, but it's also our responsibility to be cognizant of it, be aware of it, carry your own trash. I also love no one plays alone, or that you always bring someone into play, because this wide awakes cannot exist without the concept of collaboration. It's inherently collaborative, and coming into this space means that you are joining a group of people and that you're willing to bring in others with you. Another favorite rule is you're just in time. It doesn't matter when you arrive. You are perfectly on time whenever you make it here. And the one that I mentioned earlier, love over rules. It's really important to always fall back on that idea as things come up, as they always do, to remember that it's always based in love. Next slide. These are the four freedoms that FOR Freedoms is focusing on in this campaign, the 2020 Awakening. We are thinking about healing, listening, justice, and awakening. And even though they're four separate words, they're also interlocked, interconnected, as you can see in the image in front of you. You can't have one without the other. And for some folks, it's a journey of sorts, but it's not linear. It's very interconnected. Next slide. We're focused on the elections right now, and particularly we're focused on people being involved in the census, responding to the census, registering to vote, and actually voting, making a plan to vote. There's all kinds of literature that shows that if you have a plan to vote, then you're more likely to follow it. And the reason this is important is because folks register to vote at much higher numbers than they actually vote. Even people who are very well-meaning, very well-connected, and intend to end up not voting. So we're promoting this idea of making a plan to vote, and instead, and thinking about don't vote late, vote early. Next slide. So our short-term goal, of course, is all around the elections, but the long-term goal is to be thinking about the four freedoms post-election, especially because even on election day, we're not likely to know who was elected. It's going to probably be a long process of counting votes. There may be disappointments all around, there may even be chaos. And that is a time where it'll be really important for the populace of the United States to be thinking about listening, healing, justice, and awakening. Next slide. Here are some of the values that we're thinking about: insisting on the future, always asking the bigger questions, and also focusing on the fact that there's nuance in everything. Joy is at the core of everything, and we're going to talk about that more with our panelists. Listening until we actually hear what's being said. Binaries don't seem to be very helpful, so we think about bridging them a lot. We're not that interested in reacting to things. We want to be visionary and think about being proactive. And as always, we're playing this infinite game, which is laid out by some of the rules that we talked about earlier. Next slide. Here are some ways for y'all to participate. And I invite you to check out the Four Freedoms website, Four Freedoms, F-O-R, freedoms.org. This playbook, the longer version of the playbook, is there for you to download. We also encourage folks in different organizations to use it, make it your own, brand it with your own branding, change the language as you see fit. It's open source, it belongs to everyone. You can edit the heck out of it and make it fit whatever you're thinking about. Next slide. So we just invite you to join the awakening. Most importantly, right now, we're thinking about October 3rd. October 3rd is the anniversary of one of the biggest marches from the Wide Awakes in the 1860s. We are celebrating that anniversary by having events, activations all over the place, from Los Angeles out to New York. In New York, there will be some in-person events. From Los Angeles, there's going to be some virtual events. But we invite you to create your own thing, to participate in your own way. That some places are focused on music, some places are focused on speech, some places are focused on children, on making art, whatever it may be, whatever makes your heart sing. We hope that you become part of this movement by joining the events on October 3rd. And in order to learn more about that, feel free to check out the website, and also there'll be some information about it at the end of the panel. Next slide. Here are the key dates, thinking about October 3rd and the final lap to the elections on November 3rd. It's a full month. Next slide. If you go to the Four Freedoms website and you're checking out this playbook, those will be clickable links that will give you more information. And last slide. There you go. Now you know a lot more about the 2020 Awakening campaign, and I think that we are ready to invite the rest of our guests. So I want to start off by thanking y'all for joining us today. These women are incredibly brilliant and have a lot going on in their lives. So I'm so appreciative of the fact that they were able to make time to hang out today, especially because that means I get to hang out with you. So we have Niama Sandy, a New York-based cultural anthropologist. She's also a curator, a producer, a multidisciplinary artist, an incredible artist and educator. Niama's work delves into the human story, often with stories of the global Black diaspora at its center. And she's currently a visiting professor at Pratt Institute. She's been involved in many of the Wide Awakes events since, I don't know, maybe the beginning of the pandemic, definitely all summer. She doesn't talk about this as often in bios and such, but I've seen video of it. She's also a brilliant singer, and I wish that she would sing with us today.
Oh, God.
Welcome, Niama.
Thank you, Claudia.
We have Helina, I was going to say her name in Spanish, Metaferia, but I believe it's pronounced Metaferia.
Metaferia, yeah.
Metaferia. I'm always trying to make things Spanish. It really is. She's an interdisciplinary artist, and she works in performance and video installation and collage. You know, one of those people that just does it all. Her work thinks about the politics of the body and space, particularly as it relates to notions of identity and citizenship. She's currently a Mellon Fellow. She's an assistant professor at Brown University, and she lives and works in New York City. Welcome, Helina.
Thank you.
Kaneza Schaal, she's a New York City-based theater artist, and she has a recent work called Jack Ann. It showed in BAM's 2018 Next Wave Festival. It was at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago with its co-commissioners Walker Arts, Red Cat, and Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center and the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art. I had a chance to see it and I loved it. So welcome, Kaneza. And last but certainly not least, we have Anya Ayoung Chee. She's a fashion designer, consultant, social entrepreneur. She's in Trinidad and Tobago, but in Trinidad. And she also once run Project Runway. Over the last decade, she's been expanding Caribbean creative entrepreneurship regionally and internationally. She's explored lots of different avenues to integrate her love of fashion, design, and Caribbean culture and commerce all into one space. She also created the original capes for the Wide Awakes that many people have seen all over social media, and has been an inspiration for other folks to create their own versions of capes. So we're really grateful to Anya for leading us in that visual aspect of the Wide Awakes as we all continue to think about sort of the heart of what the Wide Awakes are. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.
Let's just start off really quickly with a simple question. How did you make your way to the Wide Awakes community or the Wide Awakes space? And I'll leave it up to y'all to jump in as you see fit, but if that becomes awkward, I'll start just calling on you.
If I may jump in. So back in June, I think this was maybe the second week of protests, I was invited to join a call about doing something for Juneteenth. And that sort of snowballed into a new collective being created called the Blacksmiths, which I'm heavily involved with. And so for Juneteenth event that we did, which was called Juneteenth Jubilee, we did it in Harlem. It was just stunning day. So we partnered with both the Wide Awakes and another organization called Intersectional Voices Collective. And it was sort of the beginning of, so many collaborations throughout the summer so far and into the fall.
Thank you, Niama.
I'll jump in. Hi there. So I was just saying that I was responding to what Niama was saying about her participation in Juneteenth celebrations, and I was just attending the event and a few others after that, and I felt really compelled because of the amount of energy and positivity that just kept accumulating at these events and physical events in the moment of a pandemic. So I was invited to participate and do a performance on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment through the Wide Awakes at Grand Army Plaza. And then after that, I just kept asking how I could help. And my current show at Alabama Contemporary Arts Center is now going to be a part of Wide Awakes festivities, and they're going to be doing some October 3rd festivities and programming related to Wide Awakes, which is really exciting to have this message heard also in red states, swing states, et cetera. So.
Kaneza.
I think for those of us who hold social practice and creative practice as inextricably linked, there's an inherent porousness to how collectivity functions, how resource moves between people. So I feel like I got sucked into the vortex. That's the best way I can describe it.
I really should have gone before you, Kaneza, but so last year, maybe November, December, I was asked by Hank Willis Thomas and Eric Watersman to work on cape design for what would have been a resurgence of the Wide Awakes. And it was very, very early stages, I think, of thinking through how that was going to look, which could never, I think, of, well, probably Hank had in his mind what it would evolve into, which we're all experiencing now. But at the same time, part of my practice is in designing for Carnival, which is a very big event in the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad. And I saw these overlaps of how the Wide Awakes were reawakening, how they were intending to express themselves, ourselves, I should say. And there was so much direct overlap in that practice that I couldn't help but sort of merge the two. So in February, we did a very classic Trinidadian Caribbean thing, and we just decided at the very last minute to register what we call a band, which is the way in which we celebrate on the streets for Carnival as a group of people, as a collective of creatives, as people who just decide to own the road and go out and claim space. And we called it the Wide Awakes. And that's sort of where I think, in a sense, even though it wasn't intentional, it was the actual first activation of this reawakening of the Wide Awakes. And it borrows from the culture, in my opinion, of what the original essence of Carnival is, and it's referencing to me the way in which Canboulay, which was slave riots in the 1800s, 1881, to me, I really kind of see the merging of those things. And here we are now on the verge of October 3rd, which I think is going to be a very similar energy and vibe. So I'm so excited to continue to participate, continue to create capes, continue to just be part of this incredible movement.
Love it. I'm curious about how your practice, each of your individual practice of art, creativity, how it connects or how it has a relationship with the concept of justice. Niama, I feel like you're ready.
You're right. So I think for me, as I'm thinking about, I think you said it so perfectly when you read the bit from my bio, this idea of the human story, right? It's not just about one person's experience. It's not just about one particular region. It's not just about how we individually live and move through the world, but how do we create space for everyone? How do we create space that is actually equitable, that's actually fair, that allows for all of these different viewpoints to coalesce into something that allows us all to be able to connect? And so for me, that's the sort of critical node of the whole thing, of every many-armed thing that I do. I think it's ultimately all about that.
Thanks, Niama. Kaneza.
I think I'm also interested in story, and I'm interested in places of story and how we care for and generate places of story. And I guess in my own work, I think about rehabilitating national narratives and how do we address story. And one of the things that's exciting to me about being part of this awakening is we're in this crazy moment where our story platforms, our primary story platforms, have been hijacked. And the news has become the place where drama plays out, where we experience story, where we imbibe story. And I feel like it's started to be a place where we feed this basic need that we have through this outlet. And so for me, plugging into the Wide Awakes is about taking back our places of story so that we can use that tool to build the world we actually want to live in.
Yeah, I love that. It's also connected to the idea of decolonizing the holidays, right? 4th of July becoming Independence Day. Yeah. Anya?
Well, I just love what Kaneza and Niama both said, and I think that because my work has evolved a little bit from primarily designing fashion to consulting, as you mentioned, designing strategies for particularly building ecosystems for small businesses to operate. And so creativity, I guess, is finding its way into more sort of design practice around business and really breaking down institutional ways of operating. And I think to some degree, that's my version of practice and expressing, as it really is sort of like being bold about realizing things aren't necessarily the way they are and don't need to remain the way they are, that the act of justice and the act of creating from our intuition of what a world could look like and really being bold about the future, as the playbook says, is where I feel my practice is being is evolving, where I used to be a lot more sort of connected directly to using messaging to retell stories. And a foundation that I run is called Together We, and we would create campaigns around social issues that are existing in the Caribbean. But it really has evolved now to really bridge and leverage networks that can reestablish new ways of making sure that equity is universal, and economic equity is really where I feel that plays out in my work.
Thank you, Anya.
I love what everyone said thus far, and I think you've really summed up a lot of things that I'm thinking about in terms of narrative and storytelling and equity. I would think for me, practice and my artistic practice, the through line of all the different mediums that I use is this belief in attention and care. And if we just hold presence, right, which is this valuable thing that is somehow fleeting for us, right, in this go, go, go society, just to slow, slow, slow instead. I love this idea of holding presence in my work through performance, through video, through visual art. And I also think that that's a really important quality and characteristic in social justice work, right? Having care and attention to the surroundings means our communities and the people that we love and how to hold space for difference. And so I think for me, the through line in practice and is the privilege to be an artist is the privilege to look at the ordinary and the mundane and the everyday with this new set of attention, enthusiasm, love, and care. And that's the same kind of energy I bring to social justice work.
I love that. Niama, I also wanted to come back to you on this question because I feel like there was one more thing that I wanted to hear you say.
Yeah, I love everything everybody just said. It was so good. Kaneza said this beautiful thing about generating places of story, and also coupled with what Anya just said. So for context, my family is from the Caribbean, so my entire thought process is very much rooted in a lot of the same ideas in terms of thinking about claiming space and really how do we put the power back in the hands of every regular person to create change and to create culture. So thinking about all of that, I really just wanted to just say yes, Kaneza, I love this idea of generating places and also connecting to the history of places themselves in terms of where we're activating as well. That was it.
Awesome. We were talking a little bit before this panel about this idea that the Wide Awakes promotes this concept of joy as resistance. And based on our conversations, we were talking about, what do we need to relearn from our own lineages about this practice? And what does this look like globally? This idea of joy as resistance.
I'm just going to jump in quickly. And I think Niama, again, the Caribbean connection is where a lot of this comes from me, and I know also for Niama, but Carnival, again, it's really a celebration of freedom. If you ever have the chance to be in the Caribbean and play mass, it's an extremely transformative experience. And yeah, bringing to the Wide Awakes and bringing to my work in general, the reason I decided to do this carnival band called the Wide Awakes in Trinidad is because even in that context of where it's from, it's a revolutionary way to celebrate our carnival, because a lot of our carnival has become very commercialized and sort of, borrowing from outside cultures. Whereas when we know our history, which I have only really started to learn in the last couple of years with a mutual friend of Niama's, Anya Springer, who's one of the most brilliant humans I know, really understanding what the history of our carnival, what it really was an expression and still is an expression of freedom and demanding freedom, not asking for it, just being it actually. And I think that's what joy is as a form of resistance is in the context of the Wide Awakes too, owning the space all over the country and the US, all over the world if possible on October 3rd, and really celebrating our freedom and not waiting for someone to say you're free, not waiting for the elections even to happen to own that space. There's no, to me, if we don't own the road, then who owns it, So that's kind of how I see joy as a form of resistance and realizing how beautiful it is to do that collectively.
I like that. I want to add in before folks jump in that I also would love to hear your thoughts on and why joy with so many things happening all around us, with so much pain and tragedy, etc. Is it sort of naive for us to be focusing on joy? Is it just pouring clean water over dirty water?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I think we spent a little bit of time before we met deconstructing joy and why it's so contagious and why it's really like medicine, right? And why we need that now. And when I think about these life-enhancing things that are free and available to all of us, I also think of its counterpart, which is when I think of life, I think of death, right? And we have had so much death collectively in the world at this time. And I was thinking about Ethiopian practices, being Ethiopian American, about grieving and how physical those practices are. It's about moving things out of your body. I remember when I had death in the family, an aunt told me to just keep tapping your chest as a way to release it. And I think about what we've been doing at these Wide Awake celebrations is moving our bodies to music and letting go of the trauma that's inherently stored there, right? In unison, in communion, in laughter. And I think about, how spiritual that is, how that translates and transcends beyond cultures. And I love that we're incorporating the arts and incorporating these methods of these really old methods of moving and shaking and releasing the trauma that we've experienced as a globe at this very moment and moving towards something positive.
I feel like there's a misconception that can happen about stories around trauma, or about how we actually hold trauma or speak between ourselves in some kind of initiate around these stories. The way perhaps even newscasters or journalists might retell Helena's story would be very different than how she did it. That we would talk about the pain that was being experienced. And I think the fact is we are always holding these contradictions, and that we tell stories of trauma with laughter, and we share in that contradiction, and putting the joy forward, to me, is inviting everyone to hold that contradiction with us.
I may. So I'm also a member of the Resistance Revival Chorus, which is a collective of women identifying and non-binary folks. It's kind of a marriage of music and activism. Shout out to any of you if you're watching. And one of the main sort of phrases that we use is that joy is an act of resistance, which is actually from the poet Toy Derricott. So it's really like kind of the thing that everything is built on, in terms of thinking about, even with when we did Juneteenth Jubilee, one of the things that we were doing was joy is here, joy is coming. Like we had hashtags, like this was part of the whole thing, because again, this idea of celebrating freedom while you're making it is everything, right? Yeah, I think that's
One of the ways we've been thinking about it at For Freedoms is that, historically people have been told that they should vote because it's their civic duty or their civic responsibility. And it's this very sort of intense, serious thing. But many of us have spent time in other countries. Some of us live in other countries. And that's not always the way elections or voting is talked about. Some spaces it's very celebratory. People get a day off of work. They get an excuse to celebrate. We bring out the special food, the good music, people understand that we need these dates, these annual dates, in order to be able to just build community and have a good time together. And this is why we've been talking about civic joy as opposed to civic duty or civic responsibility. And thinking about turning a different direction a little bit. So the Wide Awake space, and really just social justice movements, period, if you're interested in them, is always about collaboration. It inherently necessitates collaboration, but so much of our training, either through education and, from different credentialing programs. Sometimes it's a little bit competitive, but also just being a person here that has spent time in the United States. There's this individualism that, gets promoted, and that also can lead to competition, etc. So what are the things that we need to unlearn in order to come into a space and to collaborate in a very authentic and supportive way? What are the things that we need that no longer serve us, that we need to do away with in order to be able to press forward together? And I'm thinking about the Kickstarter campaign right now that is full of Wide Awake's organizations. It's the largest collaboration of art organizations, art/social justice organizations that's ever gotten together to do a Kickstarter campaign together. It's taking place right now. I think it's got a couple weeks left. If you want to search for it, just do a search for Kickstarter and Wide Awakes. And there's, stuff that needs to be worked out in order for people to come together to raise money together in that way. So curious to learn from you, what no longer serves us? What do we need to unlearn in order to do that work together?
I'll just put on my academic hat for a minute, because as somebody who teaches social practice in the visual art department and also has gone through visual art training, I've noticed that the biggest myth that needs to be kind of sort of turned on its head is this idea of the soul genius, the soul like mysterious artist who is like amazing and who just voila, did all this by themselves. The truth is that there's a team behind people or with people or in front of people or around people making things happen. And I think what For Freedom does, I think what Wide Awake does, it demystifies that it takes a lot of people to make something brilliant. Whether those people always get recognition is another side of the story. And I think that, you know, having more equitable practices in the ways that we make art, produce art, think about, you know, working together. I think it goes beyond something that the market may value or that capitalism may value, which is sort of this individual competition. It goes more towards this like human connection, which we can't put a price tag on. We can't commodify that. Like these interactions are priceless. So that's my sort of idea about that as an educator and as an artist.
Does anyone else? Oh,
Niama, that's you.
okay. I loved that, Helina. I love that so much. So one of the things that I have been thinking about in general is this idea of trust, right? And I think, you know, kind of, it's actually sort of in tandem with what you just said. So I'm so glad that you said that. Thinking about like, you know, one person as the generation point for everything is like not the way that any of this can work ever, right? So, you know, when you trust someone to do what they do and just let them run with whatever the task is or whatever the idea might be, it just creates such this beautiful thing. And I think going back to the conversation that we had together on Friday in events, something that Helina said, I think I'm just like obsessed with Helina on the low maybe, but she said something that made me think about my own entry point as an artist. Like music from like age like 3 or 4 is the first thing that I knew I could do before, you know, being a curator or any of these other things enters my mind at all as a possibility. And so I'm thinking about that. Ultimately, what makes music work is like the blending of tones, the blending of meters, of rhythm, and all of these other different elements. And I think for me, that's like why collaboration is everything, because it's almost a similar process.
As a theater maker, on the one hand, theater is this inherently collaborative form and is in its best state a model for participatory society, is an anchor to democracy, from, you know, being around a campfire to the Greeks' demos kratia, literally people power, to, you know, contemporary political performance extravaganzas. And on the other hand, I think theater as it exists in many of our contexts, which is deeply rooted in this Western idea of the singular genius and the erasure of labor, and which is all that it is. I agree with you very much on that. And one of the things that I think is exciting about new models of collective action, and even specifically in theater, is how to hold collective practice that allows for leadership, allows for decision making, but holds everyone's labor in the collectivity, so that the hierarchies of the roles, which have been funneled through, excuse me, my lamp, funneled through kind of Western segregating of this person's job, that person's job, this person's job, but holding that labor together, to me, feels like, as theater artists, the way through that we still can make. And somebody has to make a decision at the end of the day and all of that, but we can hold it all together.
And I just wanted to add as well, you know, in the fashion industry, being acknowledged as the designer is obviously a very traditional approach to how you're celebrated and honored. And I can be honest about being part of this, you know, evolving movement, how my ego has repeatedly showed up as to like whether or not we're supposed to be acknowledged for the work that we've done in a traditional sense, and how much actually going after that in the way I would normally for a commercial and endeavor is useless use of energy. You know, like there's no room for that, and I do think that there's a fine line there. But I think to see the thing come to life for its bigger purpose, and for the collaboration to truly, I mean, I've done so much collaborative work over the years, but this is an entirely different level of really putting the self aside and recognizing what this moving tide is doing, you know, and wherever we have a specific talent and showing up with that talent is a gift to the whole. And it doesn't matter really, there's no time even to be too concerned about the traditional way. And so an unlearning has happened. There continues to happen from many different aspects, not just the acknowledgements of credit, but also I think when I started to do more socially oriented work in a very deliberate way, and maybe this is coming from the context of the Caribbean, but being able to be multiple things at once, recognizing what civic engagement really means. That you know, somebody put a comment on my Instagram once that I'm not an expert in social justice, so I have no right to do this work. And I've had to defend, even for myself, that like, as a human, you inherently have a right to stand up for yourself and others. And so I think being comfortable with being multifaceted and doing multiple types of work simultaneously and integrating even though, as Kaneza said, you know, these things are inextricable, but I think that the world expects to have much more clarity. And I think unlearning that collectively is a very powerful and necessary thing.
There's something so radical too, Anya. We on this panel got a sneak peek at the beautiful new cape designs that Anya is working on. And there's something about you that I feel like this is a perfect example of what the unlearning looks like, that you have brought leadership, you know, to the design, to the fabrication of these gorgeous materials, and that it's also not an absenting. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like the way you've moved through all of the design work you've been doing, all of the construction you've been doing is like such a glorious example of bringing leadership towards the collectivity.
Thank you for saying that.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that we talk about in the Wide Awake space is that it's a very leaderful space, right? That there's, as soon as you feel up for it, you're a leader. And everybody is, you know, a leader in as long as they step into it. Like everybody's got some leadership to bring. So it's a very leaderful space. You don't need to ask permission to do anything. As soon as you have an idea, you can manifest it, execute it, do whatever, pull people into play, tell people you need support, and just push forward. And part of why the Wide Awakes exists the way that it does has been in response to other social movements that have been attacked from the outside. You know, with even thinking about maybe the Black Panther Party of the 1960s and 1970s and COINTELPRO, you know, part of the ability of the government to wreak havoc in the Black Panther Party was because there were things to attack. So in the Wide Awake space, what we're trying to do is everything is transparent. There's nothing to hide. It's completely decentralized. Everybody's a leader. It's a very leaderful space. And in creating that kind of a movement, it makes it a lot harder to attack from the outside, right? It's sort of in response to learning from our predecessors, learning from our ancestors about this work, and trying to bring those lessons forward with us into 2020. Of course, you know, it's still an experiment. It's in its nascent stages. But so far what's happened is there's a lot of space for people to bring what they've got.
I love that, Claudia. I really love that. And I also love that, you know, the idea of learning from history, because history, I think, is very cyclical. It's also very much here and now. Evidence of history is right here and now. And the way social justice movements are operating at this time is so radically different in a sense of the decentralized model, Black Lives Matter being one of them. And this idea that anyone can take ownership of something, right? Like ownership is for all. I mean, I think about that a lot. And I think about just the land that we live on. It's colonized land, it's land stolen, right? And a lot of these things are like, well, who really owns this? Who really owns that? Who really, you know? So I love this idea that, you know, it's yours, take it, grow with it, do what you wish. And I think it's something that a lot of people are picking up on in different collectives around the country, around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I want to put this one last idea out there, and then we'll wrap, and maybe we'll be blessed with an extra gift at the end. We'll see. I'm still waiting to find out. But Paul Robeson said, artists are the gatekeepers of truth. We are civilization's radical voice. Just wanted to see if you have any responses to the idea that artists are the gatekeepers of truth.
I guess very simple initial response to that is that I think, again, coming from the Caribbean, where being a professional artist is a chart that is very hard to follow and not usually celebrated or encouraged. But my real feeling is that creativity is the essence of every human, and that the concept of an artist, to me, there's a sort of a distinction in the world between people who practice as artists, and then there are people, just everyone. And I think artists being gatekeepers of truth is really sort of identifying that there is an artist in every single human being, and the divine act of being is a creation. And I think when we are close to our truth and we know who we are authentically, that statement applies to everyone.
Love that, Anya.
Well said, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Last thoughts?
I mean, I genuinely believe that stories build the world, and not in an abstract sense. They build architecture. The table you're sitting at, your computer screen, policy, our social and political interaction is built from the stories we tell about ourselves and each other. And we work in stories and caring for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just jump in and say that I feel like it's an incredible privilege to do this with my time. Like, my problems are art problems, they're problems around color and, composition. And, I get this opportunity to play, which is one of the pillars in the movement, for a living, right? And I think what a luxury of time that is. And so with that time, I get to be bold and say things that maybe other people feel very afraid to say because they're constricted to something for survival, like around a job or, cultural restrictions. I also, come from a country where freedom of speech for artists was not always the case, right? And so I think very much about the privilege of making in the US as well, and having that ability to say the things that others can't say. And, so I take that responsibility very seriously, and I play very seriously. So I try to use my voice and help amplify others as often as I can.
Thank you so much, Helina. And I just want, before we go to our last moment together, I just want to invite anybody who is here with us today to learn more about the Wide Awakes at wideawakes.com. There's going to be a map soon there available to show you all the activations for October 3rd, and there's ways to plug in. Plus, I think that there's new merch on there that just launched, so it's a very exciting time. So wideawakes.com, it's still growing and being built out, so there's more information to come, but check it out today. We also have, of course, forfreedoms.org to learn more about our organization. And to close us out, the lovely Niama Sandy has taken me up on my begging to just sing us out for the day.
Okay.
Niama, thank you to all of you.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to be in conversation with you all today, as well as Friday, and in general with everything that we're working on together. It's really such a gift. So I want to offer this. Forgive me. This is kind of like the first time I've spoken at length today, so the voice may be a little, but here it is. This song is called Hold On, or depending on how you may know it as Eyes on the Prize. It's a song that has been in existence for a very long time. I think the first sort of recordings of this song come to us through the Fisk Jubilee Choir in the 19th century and in the early part of the 20th century. Through the civil rights movement, people added lyrics, and the song has just continuously transformed over time, and is really a beacon of light in terms of thinking about how does one arrive at freedom and justice. Oh, the one thing we did right is the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. I got my gospel plow in hand. Won't take nothing from my journey now. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Freedom's name is mighty sweet, and soon we're gonna meet. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. That's it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Niama, for that beautiful song and that beautiful message. Hold on. It's exactly what we need right now. And thank you to Anya, Helena, Kaneza, and Claudia for that amazing, amazing conversation. As Claudia said, you can learn more about the Wide Awake movement and Four Freedoms by visiting wideawakes.com. That's wideawakes.com. So for our next session, the 2020 election will be hard fought and decisive. It already is. But with the threat of disinformation, falsehoods, and outright lies coming from political actors, how can we cut through the noise to mobilize for our vote? We're going to be joined by the Brennan Center for Justice, a nonpartisan law and policy institute based at NYU, as they share tips, tricks, and the top 9 dirty tricks that could undermine the 2020 election. It's going to be fascinating, featuring policy experts Mayna Perez, Sean Morales Doyle, Liz Howard, and hosted by journalist Angelique Roche. Stay tuned.